Hey guys, V-Man from No Budget Productions, and with me today is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor. How are we doing, Jonathan?
Hey, y'all. And by y'all, I mean you, Vance, and anybody else who's watching. Uh,
Right on, Matt. Right on. So, on today's show, I figured it would probably be fun to kind of talk about just Star Trek in general. I mean, you and I are both
Star
fans.
Trek.
Usually,
What's a
what?
Star Trek? What's a Star Trek?
What is this? What is this? Usually, when you and I get together and talk, we talk fan films and the good of it, the bad of it. Sometimes we talk about the drama behind the scenes. But I figured today's show, it'd probably be fun to talk about just generic Star Trek in general. Sometimes we've had conversations that, hell, it's probably taken 2, 3 hours of just you and me bullshitting about the franchise in general. And I figured today, fuck, man, take an hour of our time to just talk about, out of what, 10 franchises now, or how many has it been? 9, 10?
How many different series?
Yeah.
Paramount produced. You've got the 5 main series of TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. You got the animated series, so there's 6. Then you got Discovery. You got your Picard. You got your Lower Decks. You've got your Prodigy. Kind of questionable whether you've got your short treks. Want to count that? I don't know.
Well, if you're gonna count, the animated series, I feel like you kind of got to count short tracks. So I'd count it.
Okay. And then, of course, Strange New Worlds. So I ran out of fingers. What's that, like 11, 12?
12, yeah. 12 series. So, okay. So, yeah.
Name one other sci-fi franchise that has 12 different series that have gone on that long.
Yeah. And 56 years, or just about 56 years, I think is what you had mentioned in another show.
1966 to 2022.
Yeah.
Carry the one, whatever, and 6.2, whatever. Yeah, 56 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I back in the day, the golden age, I thought personally, DS9 was the creme de la creme of Star Trek. You had the serialized format. Yeah. You had great characters. Even, for me, it didn't get any better than that. You had even your lower written characters like Nog, Rom, Lita, your lower characters were more fleshed out than, say, your Troy. Garrick. I'd argue Garrick is more fleshed out than Beverly Crusher.
Well, yeah, but like that's. I mean, I've got like cuticles that are more fleshed out than Beverly Crusher. Sorry, was that my out loud voice?
But you come around now to, as you had mentioned earlier tonight when you and I were talking, we've kind of hit a new golden age of Star Trek. And I would say, from my own personal experience, I think Strange New Worlds kind of competes with DS9. I would say, for me, my personal taste, it the storytelling and character development for being such short, for such short series so far, has rivaled what DS9 did in 7 seasons. I'm emotionally attached to that series in a way that I haven't been with Discovery and with Picard. I wanted to be, especially with Picard, but I simply wasn't. But I was with Strange New Worlds. What's your take on? Because I know you write blogs on almost every single thing. Yeah.
Boy, do I write blogs. Get a job, John.
What are your thoughts on everything from both perspectives of the golden ages?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier on tonight because I knew it was coming. It's kind of interesting. When I was growing up in the 1970s, there were 79 episodes of Star Trek, and I could not imagine any Star Trek other than what I knew. which was Kirk and Spock and McCoy and that Enterprise and the other ships from the Franz Joseph technical manual. And so when Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, it was very cool. I liked that new Enterprise. It was weird. I mean, the Klingons had bumpy heads and all, and they were all wearing pajamas. Some of the stuff was difficult to get used to, but I kind of liked what I saw. But it was still grounded in what I already knew because it was the same actors, same characters. And then, of course, when The Wrath of Khan came out, loved that movie. That was like, oh, this is what you should have done all along. Love the new uniforms. I was getting used to the ship, and once again, it's the same characters I always knew and loved. So, if you had come to me in 1985 or 1986 and asked me what Star Trek could be, well, just more of this. I mean, obviously, there's other crews. I want to see, this current movie era of Star Trek. I want to see a different crew on a different starship. Maybe a Reliant class. But I couldn't think about or even conceive of what Star Trek would be beyond this reality.
Yeah.
So that when the concept came up that we're going to jump to the next generation, we're going to jump 63 years into the future, that did not compute. And I was kind of interested in the new characters, but it seemed kind of weird that the captain was from France, but he had a British accent, and the captains aren't supposed to be bald; they're supposed to wear a toupee. So, what the heck is going on here? And the ship looks more like a floating hotel. And obviously, in the first season, it was kind of difficult to really sink my teeth into it, but I gave it a shot. But as Star Trek The Next Generation continued to expand and grow, I was like, okay, well, this makes sense to me. This is starting to feel like home. It's not the TOS I grew up with, and it still was my favorite series, but I enjoyed The Next Generation more and more as the show went on. So if you asked me what I would consider Star Trek to be, well, I would say that obviously a Captain Sulu series back in that era, or maybe another starship going same places as the Enterprise D went. I wasn't going to be able to think too far beyond that box. But if you had said to me that we were going to be basing a series on a space station where instead of boldly going, we were going to be boldly staying, I would be like, well, that's not Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of Babylon 5, actually. But we're not going to go there. But back in 1993, that was what we were all saying. He stole Joe Straczynski's ideas. But as you said, Deep Space Nine became this Star Trek that we all have, even if we didn't immediately love it back when it was first. So many people I've talked to, I never watched it at the beginning, but now I watched it. I loved it. I watched the beginning. I couldn't believe how good it was. It was, and it was a whole different kind of Star Trek. We'd never seen that kind of Star Trek before, and one could not conceive of another Star Trek beyond those series. But obviously, we wanted more, and well, we're now going to give you a version of Star Trek that's kind of like Lost in Space, and I would not have thought that would work because, you're taking us away from everything that is familiar. I mean, we obviously we like the starship, we like the uniforms or whatever, but there's no Federation, there's no Klingons except for half of an engineer. There's no Borg, but later on there was a Borg. Obviously no Romulans except in the third episode. But it was one of those things where it's like, okay, everything that's familiar is gone. Can you make this work? And it's arguable whether or not Voyager did work. But once again, okay, that was Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
The next series is going to be a prequel. Okay, I was intrigued. By this point, I'm holding off being, knee-jerk negative.
Right. And
obviously there were certain things you couldn't get away from, like, it's it's 100 years before TOS, but the ship looks more modern. Like, what are you going to do? The year is 2000, 2001. Television audiences are used to something different. And arguably, Enterprise made a number of mistakes that, in the first 2 seasons that, it got better. But the 4 seasons really what the first season of Star Trek Enterprise should have always been, as far as we Trekkies were concerned, if you're going to be doing a proper sequel. But at that point, I think we all sort of knew what Star Trek was. But because we were all kind of used to it, not a lot of us were really excited by it anymore. It's one of the reasons that Enterprise got canceled after 4 seasons, because the ratings were going down. J.J. Abrams' Trek, I think most of us were of the opinion that, no, that's definitely not the Trek we would have done if we had to redo all of this. That this is Star Wars.
Right.
But then we had the desert. We had the Star Trek winter. How about that? The winter of our discontent. The winter of our discontinues, and it wasn't just a winter. It was like 12 years of no new television Star Trek. And I think the people who have an issue with Star Trek now and don't believe that we're in the golden age, that we're in the shit age, because as far as they're concerned, this isn't Star Trek. Don't compare what's coming out now to the almighty. Compare it to the alternative, which is no Star Trek. And some people say, I'd rather have no Star Trek than the crap they're giving us now. You know what? Then don't watch it.
Yeah.
Because that would be the same for you. Not watching Star Trek would be the same as having your preference of no Star Trek versus what they're doing now. Because you're not going to get the Star Trek you want. I'm sorry. No one is going to get the Star Trek that they want, the Star Trek that they imagine to be the perfect show.
Well, and that's the thing about it. When we think about Next Generation, we tend to think about Best of Both Worlds, Yesterday's Enterprise, the episode Brothers, Time Zero, Redemption, the one where Birthright, the episodes where it highlights the series. We tend to forget the episode.
We try very hard to forget Sub Rosa.
Or Code of Honor.
You will have no treaty, no vaccine, and no Lieutenant Yaw.
Oh, bless their hearts.
Oh, man, yes.
And
the Royale, it had its fair share of clunkers. Things like, what the hell were we thinking? And then it had the Inner Light. Like, where did this come from? Holy crap! My face is wet.
And the thing about it, the thing about it is, when you get to DS9, I stopped watching probably about maybe 4 or 5 episodes into season 1, and I didn't pick it up till about maybe midway season 2. To which I was like, oh, this is really good. And I think the first episode back was an episode with, I think, Garrick, where he's having to, he's having brain problems, and he's his whatever's getting shut off.
The Wire is what it was called. Yes.
Yeah. It was either that one or the one where Bashir and O'Brien are on that planet, and the Prasadas or whatever those are called, or O'Brien's got this disease or whatever, they infected him or whatever, and Bashir basically kind of keeps him alive until Starfleet can get there, and they've lied to the Federation saying, nope, everybody on the thing was killed, and to kind of stop the mass weapons from getting out. But I again, those are 2 episodes, and I don't remember which one came first, but that was one of those 2 was the first ones back. And I loved the storylines, because I was like, man, these are really great character studies. And it's one of those things, but, then again, this is the same show that had Callum Moraine, and when we look at modern Trek, there were things that I loved about Discovery season 1. I loved Lorca. I loved the Mirror Universe. I wasn't a fan of the uniforms. Didn't like I mean, I loved the dark element of the ship, but I felt like at some point it's like, man, we need something a little bit light to contrast. Like maybe the uniform should have been maybe from like season two Pike, or season two Discovery. The Pike uniform, like something, because I don't know what department anybody is. It's a little mind numbing to uh, but they did have some standout characters. Like Saru was great. Uh, that Klingon guy, Lorca. Lorca was actually my favorite captain, and I've said this before. Uh,
You like the psychopath. Good for you.
yeah, I did. And then when I found out he was the bad guy, I was like, oh shit, what does that say about me? But it's one of those things where, as much as I did not like as a whole the season one, there were elements that I did like, and I think that's where a lot of modern Star Trek people, where they look at it and they're like, no, I don't like this. Fuck it, I'm not giving it a chance. But there are elements there that are to be enjoyed. Like, I'm not a big TOS fan, and I've said that before. I don't like TOS as a whole, but there are episodes that are really, really good. Look at the Doomsday Machine. Look at Mirror Mirror. Look at that one episode where the guy's half black, half white.
Let that be your last
you know,
call.
yeah, they've got a lot of great story ideas in a lot of those episodes. But as a whole, I'm not a fan of the series. I don't enjoy most of it. It's a taste issue. And I think that's where most modern Star Trek people, like, they look back with those rose-colored glasses, you know, um, and it's just simply not that way. Like, there's been a lot of great Star Trek, but there's been a lot of bad Star Trek, and they need to kind of move beyond what their definition of Trek is. Otherwise, like you said, we're not going to get any Star Trek, and there's going to be that great gap without anything.
Well, I want to point something out. First of all, they don't need to do anything. I mean, I think one of the things is that the people who like, enjoy, or put up with, or even love the new Star Trek, versus the people who hate, abhor, detest, throw up their lunch when anybody even mentions CBS produced Star Trek, are sort of the Democrats and the Republicans. And I won't, say, who's on which side, but they each are living in their own reality. And what's interesting is that, even though Democrats and Republicans both get to vote in the presidential election, when all is said and done, I live in California. We're going to vote for a Democrat no matter what. If there's a Republican living in California, go ahead and vote. It's not going to matter. And in the same way, the folks in Oklahoma are going to be voting for Republicans, and the 2 or 3 Democrats who live in the state are going to be like, okay, well, I still like living here. But the two sides are just not going. They're not living in the same reality anymore. They're not even seeing the same facts anymore. And both sides will say the words, they need to. They need to do such and such. They need to see this. They need to understand that. It's like, you know what? It's just not going to happen. But in the same way that the candidates who are running for president are not necessarily going to be the people that you want to vote for, and you're going to be potentially voting for the less of two evils, you're never going to get your perfect candidate. You're never going to get your perfect Star Trek series, because the perfect Star Trek series does not exist unless you're watching the Orville. Ha!
Dude, I have to admit, when that doctor was grinding up on that holographic Kalon, when he has a little rub the nipple thing, it's like, God damn it, that's so great.
Anyway, let's not get diverted into the Orville, but seriously, I mean, that, and I think that's what people are comparing the new Star Trek to when they don't want to like it. They're comparing a president to FDR or Abraham Lincoln or whatever, to just sort of say this is the icon. You're not going to get another Abraham Lincoln that easily. Mm-hmm. It just we don't have we really don't have a political system that makes Lincolns happen very often. And even Lincoln, by the way, had a very squeaky voice. if Lincoln ran these days with sound bites or whatever, he wouldn't get voted. He wouldn't get through the primaries.
And that's the thing. Like, that's why I really wish a lot of people would give Strange New Worlds a chance. Like, as much as I do not like TOS and again, it's not because of anything TOS did. It's just because I have that kid mentality that I'm not going to like anything my parents liked or anything that was from my parents' generation. You know how kids typically get with, when, it's from my parents, it's not cool, But to those people, like, I watch it and I'm like, this is TOS. This is in the spirit of TOS. And I can see that clearly. Like, when I watch it, I'm like, this makes me want to go and watch TOS because I see the heart and I see exactly where they're coming from. And I've actually gone back and watched a couple episodes. In fact, I watched the Balance of Terror one, and I watched a couple episodes after that because, well, it's come on. Yeah, you know what? I'll watch another one. But it's actually made me go back and watch. And I to those people that degrade Strange New Worlds because, okay, the uniforms don't quite match up, or this little nitpick or that little nitpick. It's like, look, all those things are cosmetic. The stories are really in line in the spirit of Star Trek. And for all those people that have, they hated the JJ, they hated the Discovery, they hated the Picard. I look at this show and I'm like, look, you really cannot get closer to what you describe as Star Trek, or at least what I feel you describe as Star Trek, as Strange New Worlds. And this comes from someone who is completely outside that. And I really enjoy it.
They're going to say it's not close enough. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where if Ron DeSantis becomes the Republican nominee, he's not close enough to Trump. I really wanted Trump. And if Joe Biden decides not to run again, and it's a choice between Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg, and it's like, well, I wish it weren't a woman or a white gay guy, because we really need to just have somebody that everybody can vote for without having apprehensions because issues. And it's like, there's not ever going to be a perfect candidate. There's not going to be. And by the way, please don't write nasty letters. I'm all for women presidents and gay presidents. But in the same way, as close as you get to that quote unquote perfect Star Trek series, it's still going to be left wanting. And not by everybody. I mean, it might be your perfect Star Trek series, but it's not be somebody else's perfect Star Trek series. That's the big issue here, is that you're not writing Star Trek for one fan. And so many fans have so many different things that they want to see. I mean, you know what my perfect Star Trek series is? The West Wing. The West Wing done as Star Trek. I want to see something where there's a ship out there, but we're also seeing, the government of Earth, and we're seeing all these other things happening. That's not going to happen. Way too expensive to ever produce a series like that. And DS9 was probably the closest I got to it.
Yeah.
But there's never going to be a series. Now, honestly, that's The Expanse. I mean, if you think about it, what I just described to you, the Expanse is the West Wing of Star Trek, because you do have, what's happening in the seat of government, and you have what's happening out in space, and you have, this ship and these groups and what have you. Because everything that happens on your typical Star Trek series is usually one ship based. You get the perspective of what's happening on that one ship. And I wanted the perspective of things that were happening in different places. But that's my perfect Trek. And I'm not holding that up. I'm not, I compare it to not the almighty, but the alternative. It's not my way or the highway. It's like, okay, they're giving us something. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's fine. There's still 650 hours of Paramount produced Star Trek out there. It's just, and there's more than enough at the Sizzler buffet if you just have that.
Well, and that's the thing that's very true. Like, when you go to a buffet, like if you prefer their pizza and chicken nuggets You can go up there and get that. You don't go up there and say, "Hey, I hated your spaghetti. It tasted like crap." You don't go and tell everyone, else, "Hey, don't eat the spaghetti. It doesn't taste good." Like, you don't do that. You just simply, it's not for me. I'm not going to get it. You go get your pizza and go get your chicken nuggets. Like, that's like,
And
sample
some
what you
people like
like.
spaghetti, and don't stand there. And when everybody gets, the other people get spaghetti, don't stand there and say, well, that spaghetti just tastes like crap. You shouldn't get it. You should.
Yeah.
Better they have no food at the salad at this buffet table at all than that spaghetti.
Right.
And you know what? Go eat at Burger King, whatever. Get out of this restaurant. You don't have to eat here. So that's kind of my opinion in terms of people who feel that they're too good for Star Trek, or Star Trek isn't good enough for them. CBS is doing its best job. CBS is not trying to ruin Star Trek. Anybody who is arguing that J.J. Abrams wants to kill Star Trek, or Alex Kurtzman hates the fans, or whatever, does not understand money.
Well, no, that's exactly like. So you're telling me they get paid how many thousands of dollars to get paid to destroy that? Like, come on, man! Like,
no.
Real life doesn't work like that. Like, that's not how things work.
You know why Batgirl was canceled? Do you know why Batgirl was? You know why Warner Brothers literally threw away $90 million on a movie that was literally 25 and a half miles of the 26-mile marathon close to the finish line?
It would have cost too much for marketing.
Tax write-off. It's a tax loss. They're getting ready to sell the company, and this tax loss will be worth its weight in gold, much more than any losses it takes on taking the movie into theaters and having it just be a bomb. Just say, we've got $90 million of tax losses. But the thing is, in order for them to have it, they can't ever release it. So, unless somebody literally sneaks in to the Warner Brothers backlot and, walks out with a bootleg, canister of that movie, we're never going to see Batgirl. A lot of people are thinking they're going to eventually bring it out and, put it on a movie screen and say, well, we gave into the pressure, and, you might not like it, but here it is. And it might still happen, but honestly, it's worth its weight in gold as a tax write-off. How often does this happen in Hollywood? Almost never. So for CBS to do anything other than put its best effort towards Star Trek is unheard of, because they have tentpole property in the same way that Disney has Star Wars and Marvel, as well as Pixar and everything else. But, Star Wars is a tentpole property. It's one of the things that is going to bring young boys specifically, and older men. There's women who watch Star Wars as well, but it's one of those things that's going to bring in a certain demographic to watch Disney Plus. There's no place else that you can watch the new Star Wars series Andor, and there's no other place you can watch The Mandalorian, and there's no other place where you can see any other Star Wars that's going to be new.
Well, it's one of those things where when you go to for the people that say, nobody likes the new Star Trek, nobody wants the new Star Trek. It's when I went last year to Star Trek Las Vegas, people dressed up as the Lower Decks characters. People dressed up as, people were in the, Pike Discovery uniform. People were in the Discovery uniform. Now, not as much as the Next Gen or TOS, but that's a given because they've been around a lot longer. But it's like, well, the fans are still there. They're not going away. So, just the fact that, look at with as many uniforms, just Star Trek Picard, just those uniforms itself. I've got 4 of the uniforms, and I didn't even like the series. How dumb am I?
By the way, the uniforms you have, none of them are licensed.
Right.
Which leads one to think, maybe CBS wants to get back into the licensing business at some point for uniforms, but yeah, Picard is a series that I think, it has, once again, I think it has its strengths and its weaknesses. There are some aspects of Picard's first and second season, I think, are absolutely great. But I think overall, it was a chore to watch. And I think overall, Discovery is a chore to watch. Whereas Strange New Worlds is not a chore to watch. And part of the reason for that, by the way, is that there's no dislikable character on Pike's Enterprise. There is nobody that you wouldn't want to hang out with. You know, I mean, maybe Lal, you know, Ninian Singh. You know, maybe number one a little bit, although, you know, who doesn't want to hang out with Rebecca Romaine? But you know, every character is somebody that you would love to serve on a ship with. Because, you know, when I was growing up, I dreamed about being on Kirk's Enterprise. And, you know, I think I was too old to dream about being on Picard's Enterprise. But, you know, there were kids who grew up, you know, dreaming of that. I don't think anybody's dreaming about being on Discovery.
No.
It's like,
no.
That is a totally I mean, that is a show that makes The Office look positively perfect as far as social interactions go with other people.
Well, I mean, like I've like Royce has peeked in a little bit on, because Mona and I watch, no matter what Star Trek series, like we'll always watch the new episode when it comes out. Except for she doesn't watch the cartoon.
You sure
but like
that's the
Royce,
best one?
but no, Royce and I watched it this morning. Like we always watch Lower Decks. We've not watched. I think we watched Prodigy like 2 episodes, and then he kind of got out of it. He was like, he didn't care. But Lower Decks.
After the 5th episode of Prodigy, he'll be hooked.
He just doesn't hold the attention span. But whereas the other one, Lower Decks, it's funny to him. So I don't know why. I think give it a year and then we'll go back to and revisit it. But I mean, like at first he was like, you know, he was like, oh, what is this? But then it just didn't hold his attention. But with Lower Decks, he sat there and watched it. Like he actually put his video game down and just started watching with me until I passed out. And then, then I don't know what happened. But like, I mean, we sit there and we watch Lower Decks every time it comes out, you know, and we've rewatched the series a couple of times, you know, and I mean, we watched that and Boss Baby, and you know, I'm so glad we passed the Coco Melon stage. Good God, that was ugh. But Lower Decks, but I mean, like he's seen a little bit of Discovery, and he was like, you know, he's seen a little bit of Picard again, Now he really did like the Borg, the cube, because he recognized it. Just like in the intro to Lower Decks, when they're fighting the Borg cube, he's like, "Dad, it's the square ship." I'm like, "That's right, the Borg." He's like, "Yeah, the robots." I'm like, "That's right, the robots." You know, and he always laughs whenever the Cerritos is flying in the intro, and it kind of crashes into that little ice asteroid thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, his laughter is just, you know, infectious.
Hey, Jaden loves that show too. I mean, and you know, I was not showing, you know, when Discovery first started, Jaden was only 7 years old, so he obviously wasn't going to see it. Now he's 11. But you know, we have watched the 2 seasons of Lower Decks and Prodigy. He loves both of them. You know, and he's also at an age where, you know, we can watch some other stuff as well. I mean, we loved the new Lost in Space. We're watching through Babylon 5 now. And it's, oh man, he fought that kicking and screaming. But now he's like so into it. And he's analyzing it too, which is really great. He's 11 years old, and you know, he's figuring stuff out. But anyway, yeah, it's, you know, and for anybody who says they don't like Lower Decks, I'm sorry, you need to have a sense of humor installed. You know, you didn't get the proper one upon birth. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You need to have a sense of humor installed. You can laugh at Star Trek. It's possible.
There's so much to like. I'll admit, like I didn't like it at first because I didn't know how to take it. But once you learn to laugh, you know, laugh at it. I mean, there's so many Easter eggs.
And tell yourself it's okay to laugh, that Star Trek has been around for 56 years and there's all this untapped potential. And it's just, I mean, it is so brilliant. And it's the same people who say, I don't like Rick and Morty because I don't like that kind of humor. And I totally understand that, because Rick and Morty is filled with expletives, and it is purposely disgusting. It is purposely shocking. It basically, takes the Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Back to the Future dynamic and just stabs it in the heart 200 times. Doc Brown is a sociopathic alcoholic who doesn't give a crap about anybody in the entire world. And doesn't have any kind of filter, and pretty much just says exactly to your face whatever it is he's thinking. And yet there's something so wonderful about that. And if you let yourself get past the fact that this is the most totally inappropriate cartoon ever, it's brilliant. And especially if you're a sci-fi fan, because it takes every single trope of sci-fi. Every new episode is like, okay, what are they going to make fun of now? And and the way they make fun of it is just so brilliant. And it's just operating on such a different level. And if you're not watching, if you're watching Lower Decks or not watching Lower Decks and not liking it because it's making fun of Star Trek, the character shouldn't act like that. You're depriving yourself of this amazing level of brilliance. And if you want, look at Lower Decks as a hollow program, as opposed to being actually inside of the Star Trek reality universe. Consider it the Rick and Morty hollow program of the 24th century. But it's just so brilliant. Go ahead.
Well, I've watched. I mean, like I really like the Naked Gun series. I think it's one of the best film series out there, especially the first one. Like I watch that, occasionally whenever I can, whenever it pops on, I'm like, oh, I'll watch it. I'll stop and watch it. It's kind of sad. It kind of makes me regret the days when we had, cable, when you could flip through channels, be like, oh, Naked Gun, here we go, I'll watch that, because it would randomly come on, kind of like Christmas time.
Nothing on the other three channels.
Right. But it's got that same type of self-referencing humor, where if you're just listening, you miss some of the jokes, where some of the jokes is in the absurdity of the situation, where if you're watching it, you're like, that's really slick, that's intelligently done. And if you're just listening to it, you're like, wait, they're being dumb. Well, no, it's not. It is intelligently done. And it's funny because it is poking fun of itself, and it's aware of it. The characters aren't, but we as the audience, it's semi breaking that wall, and it's allowing us to laugh with them, even though they're not necessarily laughing. It's great fun, and that's what it's meant to be. And I think we've hit that point of Star Trek where we can laugh at ourselves, and it's kind of in the same note of when in Living Color or Saturday Night Live or Mad TV would do parodies of Star Trek, except this is Star Trek actually laughing at itself instead of, not parodying itself, just having a good laugh, but still telling stories that are inside canon. Because at the end of the day, with everything going on that's negative, can't you have a good laugh? And that I think is especially for someone like Royce or Jaden, where Discovery's a little too dark, Star Trek Park a little too dark. This is a perfect trek for them to pick up and go, you know what, I want to get on there. Like, Royce loves the show, and it's the perfect stepping stone for them to go, you know what, yeah, I'm kind of getting old of cartoons. What's this one about? What's this one about? Because he watches Next Gen when it's on. He knows what it's all about. In fact, it was kind of sweet the other day. He had found Captain Picard behind the couch. It was a custom one that I did of Picard in the DS9 uniform. Well, because he was playing
Picard behind the couch. No, it's one of those sentences you don't expect to hear in the middle of it. Oh, look, I found Captain Picard behind the couch. Oh, you still alive?
But he had found him, and he brought it to me. He said, "Hey, Dad, I found Captain Picard." And I was like, I was so proud, because I'm like, "Oh, you know who he is? Oh, man, I've never been so proud as a father." And Mom was like, fuck, Vance, it's toy. I'm like, oh, but I'm proud. I'm proud, Papa. I wanted to go blog up,
Don't
it's
take
just,
this away from me.
but it's one of those things where it's like, this is a great gateway to those other Star Trek shows once they get older, and it's just for the same reason like him and I still watch Looney Tunes. We'll go back to those, old school 1940s, 1950s cartoons of Tom and Jerry. It's
Mhm.
like this is great memories for the kids, and it's just for me, I don't know why people take them so seriously. It's just silly.
Well, I'm gonna bring us full circle back to what I was saying earlier, 2 or 3 hours earlier. Is that we couldn't conceive back when Paramount Star Trek was being made of a show like Lower Decks.
Right.
We couldn't even conceive, honestly, of a show like Discovery. We couldn't conceive of a show like Picard. I mean, Picard is Star Trek without a starship. Like the entire thing's taking place on a runabout. It's who could conceive of Star Trek like that? Well, the idea was for Picard, it's not about the crew of the starship. It's about these individuals that are each at a crossroads in their life at different points in their life, but every single one of them is at a crossroads where they can either continue in a self-destructive path or they can turn things around. And so the idea of Picard is to be ultimately hopeful. Now, I don't know how well it succeeds in that, but in order to do that, every single one of the characters has to be flawed. And each one of the characters does have a fatal flaw. Unlike Lower Decks as well, but unlike Strange New Worlds, where everybody's somebody you want to hang out with, I don't think I want to hang out with Agnes. As cool as she is, she just keeps killing people that she's supposed to like. So she's kind of dangerous. And Seven, a huge chip on her shoulder. And Rafi has a great sense of humor, but she also has some addiction problems. And Picard's too godlike for me to really feel comfortable hanging out with him. But he's also in the first season, he's kind of he's mentally losing it a little bit. He's really kind of intense. And and Rios, Rios is cool, but I'm allergic to cigar smoke. Everybody has an issue on that show, except for Elnor. I mean, we all love Elnor, but honestly, Elnor cuts people's heads off. I mean, he's honest about it, but he cuts people's heads off. And so it's a Star Trek we could never conceive of before. In the same way, we could never conceive of Lower Decks. We could never conceive of an animated Star Trek episode or a Star Trek series that literally tried to make fun of Star Trek. It was beyond our ability to conceive of. And there are people who aren't watching these shows, who are resenting these shows, who can't conceive of this either, and they won't allow themselves to. And also work my way back to the Democrats and Republicans, and not all Republicans, but a lot of Republicans cannot face the possibility that the election wasn't stolen, that there wasn't some major hanky-panky going on. They just can't face that. And the Democrats can't face the possibility that maybe something that the Republicans want isn't completely batshit crazy. Like maybe something makes sense, but no, none of it makes sense because they're living in different worlds.
Mhm.
So the fans right now, the ones that are watching the show and enjoying it, can't understand why other people can't just enjoy it. But the ones who aren't enjoying it and are saying this isn't Star Trek don't understand why other people are liking it. They can't bring themselves to even accept that other people are liking it. The one person on Facebook, I wrote a blog recently, talking about, how Strange New Worlds was really, really good. And this person said, fans who like Strange New Worlds are just so desperate for Star Trek not to be canceled that they'll like anything.
That's really funny because like I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't give a shit if there's so much out there. There's almost an oversaturation of content. Like to say like I don't care if Star Trek exists or not in a brand new format is like it doesn't have to be Star Trek because there's so much stuff out there to watch. If you have HBO Max or if you have AMC Plus or if you have Hulu or Netflix or Paramount Plus, not Paramount Plus,
Apple
uh,
TV
Pe-
Plus.
Peacock, or yeah, I mean there's so many different streaming services.
Embarrassment of wit, Rich. I am so far behind on crap. I haven't watched any of the last episode, the last season of The Boys. I'm only just now finishing up The Expanse. I got 2
Yeah,
episodes left. Like, oh my god, it's only 2 episodes left.
The Expanse looked good. I only honestly I started it for like 5 minutes and I turned it off to go do something. I never got back to it. I need to start watching it. I never got back to so
Vance. Let me explain to you the Expanse. You need to battle your way through the first season. It's like the first season of Babylon 5. I mean, you said people don't remember the bad episodes of Next Generation or whatever, Star Treks or whatever. Like the first season of Babylon 5 wasn't as good as you remember. And the first season of The Expanse is just painful. And you'll have no idea what's going on. You'll have no idea what the Belters are saying because they talk in this crazy other language that sounds like English with a different accent. And sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And there's this detective with this fedora hat. And it's like, what the hell is going on? Fight your way. Fight, Vance. Fight your way through the first season of The Expanse, because by the time you get to season 2, you'll be like, oh crap, I need to watch the next episode. I can't go to sleep yet. But seriously, fight your way through season 1. Just do it. But yeah, you're right. There's way too much, but it's all, I mean, some of it is so amazing. Like I said, Lost in Space. Who knew Lost in Space
great.
Good as Lost in
Space?
That a female Dr. Smith, of course, who would have thought a female Starbuck would have worked? But look at BSG. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing.